Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very special Honey and Stag event. Thank you for joining us. Anybody who's familiar with Honey and Stag knows that we have a huge passion for the printed word. We're mad about crime fiction, but we are also very, very keen to find new texts regardless of genre. And tonight, is a text that, well, I think it speaks to the moment. I think it speaks to the age that we live in. And, well, a text that is going to shed some light, social media, business. Our guest this evening for this special launch is Claire Burdett, and we are going to celebrate the launch of Social Goodness. So I'd like to welcome into the studio, please, Claire.
Hi.
Good evening, Claire. Wonderful to see you. How are you?
Good evening. I'm very well indeed. Lovely to see you too.
Thank you so much for being here. It is an absolute joy, delight, and pleasure to celebrate the launch of your book. We are going to get deep into that text and talk about its conception and all that is found there. And then later, I know that you've got two very special guests for us as well to keep this conversation going. So let me introduce you to any viewer who isn't familiar with her. Claire is an entrepreneur, founder, businesswoman, writer, marketing pro, and social media aficionado. She's worked in the digital and social media since its beginning and founded 3 online businesses, including the first dedicated social media marketing agency in the UK. I find that immense, and I'm going to ask you about that. It's one of my first questions. Claire is also a prolific writer for magazines and blogs, a professional editor, and is also a trend spotter. Wow, what an absolutely fabulous resume there. It's sparking all over the place. And so I want to ask you, first of all, how did you get into this world? It says you were there from the beginning. How did you get into it?
I got divorced. That's how I got into it. I was stuck at home with 2 very small children, working for an agency that was lagging behind. I'd come from media. I did a degree in media, which was the first degree in Europe to specialize in media studies, long time ago. It taught us everything. They didn't really know what to do with us. They kind of lumped it all in. So we had semiotics, we had press, we had trends, we had TV, radio, etc. And I'd been in that world all the way through, and then started work for an agency who were a marketing agency who were terribly backward. They only published written word in paper. Whether it was marketing material or magazines. And I was going, you really need to get websites, really need to get into websites. And they were like, no. And strangely, they went out of business quite soon afterwards. And I was stuck at home and feeling restless, and went online, found a social networking group called Academy, where I met a lady called Helen, amongst other people. And we started chatting a lot on Skype with other people, especially a lady called Sally. And one day we all we were all really early initiators, and we got onto Twitter and we were queuing up to get onto Facebook. Can you imagine that? We queued up, we waited for an invite to get onto Facebook. Can you imagine that? Anyway, so we're all on Twitter, and there was a lot of crossness going on because there was a lot of people from America selling marketing solutions to businesses on Twitter before they even knew really what was going on. A lot of money changed hands and there wasn't a lot of effect. And the story basically was that I was trying to put a magazine to bed while chatting on Skype, and they got very into it and were saying, oh, we should do something about it, And I said, yeah, we should start an agency. We've got everything here. Sally can do the web design, Helen can do the PR, I'll do the marketing, it'll be fine. And they went, oh, that's a good idea, let's do it. And within about a month, we had our first client.
Absolutely. I adore stories like that. Yeah, Angie, totally. Wow. When an idea is grabbed onto,
Mm.
and people, and forgive me for saying this, but I think what excites me the most is the notion of women getting together to make this happen. I'm really glad, our our men friends who do exactly that. But I think, to see women taking an idea forward and bringing it into being, especially maybe in a field where traditionally, initially, it was thought, maybe not.
Mm.
So fabulous. And I think, again, anybody listening this evening, hearing you speak, there's inspiration in everything that you're saying, to not be afraid, to give it a go, to try things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
if it speaks to you and it talks to your heart, go for it. Everybody has such a lot of talent, and if you've got the belief, just go for it.
Yeah, it is the way to go. Yeah. So,
Mm.
getting into publication,
Mm.
um, was it a difficult road? Because this is your 10th book that
Yeah.
we celebrate tonight. I mean, and that's an amazing track of publications.
I am the only one who actually made it into paperback was the children's book, Lumpy Loves Chocolate, which was written for my children and was picked up by the Dyslexia Society, and that was an actual published paperback. The others have all been ebooks, but we've used them and given them away. Hundreds, thousands of people have downloaded them and read them. So yeah, it's good fun. I like writing. I find writing books really easy, apart from this one. Usually, as everybody who knows me can testify, I can write a book in a couple of weeks if it's something I know the subject matter. This one took 9 months.
Wow.
Because everything was happening everywhere. It was all these different areas. Everywhere I was seeing it, there was bubbling up in, they were naming it in different areas like humaning and marketing and ESG, environment, social and governance in finance. And every time I thought we'd got to a point where I could draw a line under the manuscript, something else happened. And my editor was getting really, really, really frustrated with me, I have to say.
Oops.
And I'm sure there'll have to be an update because it's just one of those movements that's just so grassroots. It's happening all over the place. Everybody has got their own thing going on, but it's a bigger collective movement. Like just as we were putting it to bed, Capitol Hill happened. That happened on social media. They saw it happen on social media and nobody in the network stopped it. Facebook didn't stop it. I mean, that's huge. So what's happening in social media is having an effect in the real world, and social media networks are losing trust because they're not actually working to stop that. It's a big thing at the moment.
And just to come back though to what you were saying, I think it's one of those occupational hazards of being at the cutting edge, that as soon as you feel that you've got hold of it,
Yeah.
and definitely, I mean, we're here to celebrate that publication tonight, but I have no doubt that in 12 months' time there'll be an update on that in that book.
I believe there will have to be.
Yeah, totally. Which will be good. So, Social Goodness, published by the Media Marketing Company.
Yeah.
How did you come across them? Where was the connection made there?
That's us.
Is that you?
That's our imprint. Yeah, we decided, our accountant said in the end, why don't you make some money off these books that you actually keep on publishing? And we went, oh, yeah, that's radical. Hadn't thought about that. So we've created an imprint and we will publish our own, but also other people's, we hope. Books that are actually trend spotting, talking deep about marketing, branding, etc. That's the aim. So hopefully it's going to be a force for good.
I mean, even in you saying that it's not just what you as a company are putting out, but extending, that offer that says we want to support other people in their publications around these things. That is wonderful. So who is this book aimed at? Who should be? I mean, I want to say everybody should pick this up to see what is happening, in the world. But did you have a particular audience in mind when you
Yeah,
put this together?
I think I'm talking to, well, I know I'm talking to C-suite and to business owners, especially those. Basically, this trend is affecting all businesses. There's no place to hide. Social media, if it's done anything, has created a whole transparency around business. People can find out stuff so easily, and if they get cross, like say with the Burger King, you saw the Burger King faux pas over International Women's Day. And before you could even turn around, people had gone and found out who was on their board, whether they paid their taxes last year, what their policies are, how they treat their staff, what the minimum payment is for their staff, do they have help? All of this stuff was just then shared on social media. Breathtaking. I mean, breathtaking how much people can find out within an instant. So brands behaving badly just leave themselves wide open. I'm talking to C-suite at the top, corporates. Now, once they buy into it, actually, and we've got loads and loads of case studies in the books of, and even including Exxon and the big polluters, where people have realized what's going on and they're buying into it. But then you've got the little companies, 1, 2, 3 people who actually in some ways have it easier because they're still like your local neighborhood business where people know them, interact with them personally, and it's much easier for them to control what's happening and how they are relating to their customers and their staff and their suppliers. The ones who are having a real hard time are the medium-sized businesses, the ones with perhaps 100 or so, 50 to 300 people, where perhaps they haven't got the income that the corporates have, but they haven't got the personal touch that the little ones have got, and they're the ones who are really struggling. And then that's where things like B Corps comes in, and ISOS, and all of the all the ways of making sure that what you're doing is good stuff. So I'm talking to business leaders, I'm talking to C-suite, I'm talking to entrepreneurs, and founders, and it is basically get your ducks in a row, because if you go on social media, which we all do have to, that is where brands have to be, because that's where people are. People, if they don't like you, if they're not interested in you, they mostly ignore you. I think there's research from Meaningful Brands that said 79-80% of companies could disappear tonight and nobody would care.
Wow.
Nobody would care. It's a huge amount. So mostly people ignore brands because what they're saying is irrelevant. It's just not interesting. It's a kind of mundane update. It's a this, it's a that. And if they put out advertising, we all know it. Oh, I love that advert. Love that advert. The one with the jingles. I can't remember who it's by. So it's got to be really meaningful. Content has got to be really meaningful for people to care. And they've got to see that the brand cares. Now, the upside of that is that as soon as they can see that a brand cares, that it invests, like Domino's Pizza, mended roads in order to make it easier for their people to deliver pizzas. And gosh, yeah, it did make a huge amount of clarity on social media, as you can imagine, with people taking pictures of a road mending with Domino's Pizzas branding on it, and all these jokes about hard crusts and inedible pizza. But you know what? It was a good initiative, and people really, really bought into it, and it gave them a load of good PR, free publicity, etc. And they were seen as doing a lot of good for their community. And it's that kind of thing. In West Berkshire, where I'm based, we have a local Good Exchange, they're called. They help other businesses and charities to do good, and they have such a good reputation, and they came up with all sorts of amazing initiatives in 2020 that people really loved, and they shared it and talked about it, and it became really good PR for them. And this is the thing: if you do good, people like you. They'll talk about you, they'll welcome you in, they'll talk to you, they'll include you in the conversation, they'll say, what do you think about this? If they don't like you, the best you can hope for is they'll ignore you.
Yeah. Yeah,
And then
because
and once the algorithms learn that you don't like them, they won't show them your stuff. So that's the best you can hope for.
okay, I've got a bit of a, I don't know if it's a moral question or too philosophical, but I'm really intrigued by the fact that, yeah, this element of doing good, of, you know, of positive action,
Yeah.
to me, and this is, you know, it's outside my sphere really, but to me it doesn't sound like the business mentality that I've come to know, that really, you know, that we can't waste time and resources and effort on things like that. We need to focus. So how and why is that change been coming about?
I think it's been growing all millennium. I've been tracking it since
Mm-hmm.
since the beginning of this century, but it really turned into a tsunami in 2020. People were making they people were losing their jobs. People were stuck at home. People were restricted. I mean, it's been a hell of a year from all sorts of
Mm-hmm.
ways of viewing it. They were anxious. They were scared. They were worried about not just the pandemic and being stuck at home, but they were worried about the state of society. They were worried about the world. And then they were looking at the businesses and saying, okay, who cares about me? Who's making the effort to make shopping with them easy,
Mm-hmm.
safe? Who's actually pivoting so that they will deliver to my door? Who will ensure that their environment is safe and easy to use? Everybody made those decisions. There wasn't a single person who didn't make those decisions about businesses. It's really put businesses back on their back feet. If they didn't care, people didn't use them.
Mm-hmm.
And this research suggests that this is going to become a set in trend. People only invest in people that they care about.
And to me, you know, it sounds like no bad thing. And maybe again, out of this really difficult year that we've had, to
Mm,
see some really, you know, if we can talk about a positive change or a
yeah,
refocus
yeah.
on how to do good business, what it means to do good business.
That's it. That's the key. Good business actually turns out to be good business. So by doing good and behaving well, you attract the best people, you attract the best investment. In 2020, investment in ESG companies, that's environment, social and governance, that had the good profile, as in, a decent company, went over $1 trillion for the first time. All the smart money is going towards companies that are getting their house in order, who are investing in sustainability, who are looking at their supply chains, who are investing in their people, who are not being, what's the word they use all the time? White, male, pale kind of businesses that just
Mhm.
take profits out and
Yeah,
invest it back. Colonial, that's the word I'm looking for. Colonial
yeah.
businesses where they just take the profits out of their local places. Companies like Eaton, for example. Eaton's a brilliant company. It's an American company. It's got one of the few black CEOs in America. They have an ethics and compliance department. They have ESG department, and their profits have been phenomenal over the last year. They have really done well. And this is the thing. People think that all this effort means that, it means that they're going to drop profits. And it
Mm,
doesn't.
mm,
It doesn't.
mm.
It means that their profits are going to be better.
Wow, wow.
I
Now,
know.
so it's phenomenal. Yeah. I,
Who knew that people actually, if they like what you're doing, they'll spend money with you? Who knew
with
that?
you. And companies being willing to do that, I think that's another aspect of this, though, I wonder about is how governments, you know, will respond to this, because I'm not.
They nearly always lag. I think we've
Mm,
seen that with our own government. USA have suddenly realised what's going on. I think I can see a lot of positive reactions. The UK's lagging still. They're even talking about getting rid of GDPR, which is such a silly thing to do when you've got Apple, for example, who've just changed their settings so that iPhone users have to opt in to receive advertising from apps like Facebook. Well, gosh, that's a bit of a game changer, isn't it? Can you imagine? Facebook are absolutely beside themselves about it because, you know, it's going to disrupt their advertising. Third-party data is being removed from Google Ads and Chrome. That's a bit of a game changer. So governments are a little bit, not all of them, EU as a general thing, they are, obviously that's not individual governments, but the whole EU is pushing towards more data privacy. But many governments aren't. I think they're lagging a bit, but we've seen this all the way through. They've found it very hard, for example, to rein in social media. They've found it very hard to get their heads around the whole technical, digital advancements over the last 20 years. They're only just getting to grips with it. There's a whole thing with Facebook in the US at the moment where they're driving to break it up because it's got so big that nobody seems able to actually rein it in. The only people who are going to be able to rein Facebook in are the advertisers. So they're more power to the businesses.
Oh, yeah.
That.
The power that's there. Well, the advertisers, and coming to the advertisers, I've got one more question to ask you before I'm going to ask you to do a lovely, you know, read a section for us from the book, really whet our appetite for this. And then I know I'm going to hand over to yourself and your guests to chat these things out. But what I wanted to ask about was branding in the 21st century. And again, of course, social media, the big player there. How are we as consumers responding to branding? Have you noticed changes in the way that people like foster a brand, identify with a brand?
It's not really. The thing is that there has been the algorithms have changed things, not so much the way people respond, but the way that their criteria has changed, as in people are prioritizing brands that care, who actually are aligned with their ethics and their thought processes. So somebody like Patagonia, for example, if people are, I think there was a lovely quote from their founder who said, every time I prioritize doing good for the world, my profits go up, because everybody that buys into that adores them for that. Ben & Jerry's is another one, a catalogue, a case study in the book where Ben & Jerry's, they're very active, as we all know. They really prioritize social goodness, social justice. They spoke out on Twitter. They got absolutely slammed by Priti Patel, and who got slammed back by all their supporters who came hurtling through and just went, I don't think so, sunshine. It was amazing. And this is the thing, you know, if people believe in what you're doing, they will be your fan club. Trouble is with the algorithms, if they don't believe in what you're doing, if it doesn't resonate with them, not only will they not care enough to actually buy into it, react to what you're saying, the algorithms will make sure that they don't even see it because they don't respond to it. So it just drops off the face of the planet. So if they love you, it's very Marmite. If they love you, that's great. And they will run to your aid if things are, you know, if anybody attacks you, they'll be in your club, your tribe, you know, brand Nike or brand L'Oreal or whatever, if they believe in what you're saying. But if they don't, you become invisible. To us people, most brands are interchangeable, so you've really got to stand out.
And I'm thinking as well, what you're saying is the idea of going back to that classic song, you know, I'm holding out for a hero.
Yeah.
And maybe, you know, again, this shift that is saying, you know, I've looked everywhere and I just haven't found that kind of hero that I'm looking for. But look at these companies that are actually taking climate change seriously. Look at these companies that are taking social justice seriously.
Yeah.
Maybe I never thought I'd find my heroes in business.
No, it's a very unlikely, but this is what's happening because, you know, some businesses have the clout, power and spend of a small country.
Whoa.
So, you know, we think in business, I think most of us feel that we're pretty powerless, really. You know, just kind of have to wait for people to buy our stuff. It isn't the case. We have a voice, we have income, we have power, we have influence, and we really need to start using it.
Thank you. Claire, would you be so good as to treat us to a bit of the text?
I shall, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. In 2020, the trend I have been tracking throughout the 21st century turned into a tsunami. It was everywhere. People in different niches named the bits they were seeing. ESG profiling, that's environment, social and governance in the financial world. Sustainability and resilient supply chains in manufacturing. Meaningful purchasing in retail. Humaning in marketing. Allyship, the kindness economy, the circular economy, betterment, social advocacy, corporate responsibility, ethics and compliance, social responsibility, brand activism, and issue fluidity. All are essential elements of the greater global whole. That is social goodness. Businesses that weren't already focusing on it as a number one priority before 2020 found themselves facing an increasingly hostile community throughout the year, or were just completely ignored. Those that tried to hitch a free ride on the trend were attacked and ridiculed. So why is this happening? Because we're fighting for our lives here, and we have a world to save. Google saw a massive uptick in searches about stopping climate change, for example, and allyship in 2020. People are making increasingly informed choices about where they can ethically spend and invest their money, as well as using their time and energy to ensure brands that do the right thing are rewarded. They're using social media to influence corporate policy. Think about that for a minute. Using social media to influence corporate policy. Not just that, but a majority of them are also persuading other people to boycott bad brands. It has become crystal clear that business leaders can't hide even if you want to. And brands are increasingly facing a clear choice. It's either embed social goodness in your DNA, or in a very short period of time, you won't have a world to worry about, let alone a brand. Added to this is the way people are expecting businesses to take an active lead and do good, as highlighted in the 2021 Endelman Trust Barometer. It's an unprecedented challenge for brands. You need to look at every part of your business, from people to processes to supply chains, and make sure every bit is fit for purpose. Communicate it to your staff, communities, audiences, demonstrate and prove to people in a memorable and meaningful way that you care. There is no choice, no wriggle room, because that's what the customer wants. Only it's not just the customer. It's your investors, your suppliers, your staff, and the communities in which you operate. And social media means that every brand is now on view 24/7 and everything is transparent. Yet far from this being Armageddon for brands, this challenge is incredibly positive. Time and again, we see that the profits and savings inherent in doing the right thing are far greater than a business expects, which when added to the well-being of the staff and the positive feedback and support from customers, it all creates a virtuous circle. It's a win-win. An increasing number of businesses are recognizing the fact. Not all heroes wear capes, as the saying goes, and a more unlikely bunch of superheroes than most of the folk in C-suite worldwide would be hard to imagine. But this is your time to step up and be a hero.
Claire, thank you so much for sharing your text with us. I wanted to ask, how do we get hold of a copy?
You can go to local bookshop to get a paperback, and it's available on Amazon as well, ebook, and obviously paperback there too. Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant, lovely. So now, thank you for sharing that. What I'd like to do is just take a step back now while you bring on your guests and go even deeper into this subject matter. Is that okay with you? Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And
I'm going to bring on Kathy Ratnam first. So, joining me, hello, is Kathy from Sri Lanka. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, actually. So you are a co-founder, a co-host, and a category designer. So
yes, I am. Yes, I am. Thanks for having me, Claire. So I'm a category designer, but not in like the conventional sense. I believe that all category design needs to inherently be embedded in an impact design, so that from the outset, when categories are designed, we are cognizant of the impact that that category potentially could have on communities, on society, and also on the planet. Because as you so rightly said, it's really important for big brands, big companies who have more money than small countries to really wonder about what kind of impact their categories and the products that they're creating is really having on society and on the planet, right? So because there's no plan B, we just have a plan. We only have one Earth.
Exactly. I loved your fourth element of category design as well, that impact-driven category. Hang on, we'll start again. That impact-driven category creators are superheroes. I mean, it resonated with me because, you know, that is it, isn't it? With great responsibility comes great power.
Exactly, right? And also, people seem to forget that once you create something, you don't just get to enjoy the good, you're also responsible for the bad, like all of the repercussions that you put out into the world, right? And so that's why, again, going back to fundamentals, category design is about company design, category design, and product design. But it does not take into account at the outset the impact that category is going to have, which is really, really important, because once you grow into this behemoth of a company, then trying to stuff you back into a box is hard. So which is why, as you say, social goodness needs to come from the outset.
Yeah, it needs to be embedded, doesn't it?
It needs to be embedded. It needs to
in
be
everything.
Correct.
Exactly. Products right from ground up. I mean, so many luxury brands are now stepping back and going, okay, supply chains, how on earth do we make sure that our supply chains are ethical and sustainable?
Correct.
And so new companies and new products need to be designed from ground up.
Correct.
And it's not just products, is it?
It's not just products, it's services, it's companies like Facebook, for example. I mean, in the original blog post that I wrote, I talked about how Mark Zuckerberg had said that Facebook wasn't originally designed to be a company. It was designed to have a vision of connecting people and enabling, open connectivity and conversation. If they led with that, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in today.
They're very challenging as a company in many ways.
Correct. I think they lost sight. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, it's true. They did. They lost sight. I think Google's the same. Google's tagline at the beginning was "Do no evil," and
now
somehow
they've removed it. By the way.
Yeah, exactly. They've removed it, and those two companies have so much power now that we looked at Facebook going up against Australian government a couple of weeks ago, and it was just incredible how stroppy they got about having to actually pay some money to actually use content. And everything isn't just for you to enrich you. I mean, it's not a great bill that the Australians have put together, but at least it's a step forward. But Facebook's got so big that it's very difficult for anybody to challenge them.
And that's exactly the point. And Facebook is a category creator and a category leader.
Yeah.
Right? This is where the problems start. I mean, idealistically, I would like to believe that everyone, when they start out, I think start out to do good,
Yeah.
right? But the road to hell truly, truly is paved with good intentions.
Yeah.
Along the lines, you sort of lose your way in the profits and the growth and the market share of it all. You forget that you started out as this idealistic entrepreneur who wanted to change the world for the
It's
better.
true, but I'm heartened by the fact that people are coming together, like Wicked Seven, which we're both members of, and ground root movements like Don't Fund Hate and Pay Up, which was a fashion
Correct.
movement.
Yeah.
And all of this is so inspiring. Brand activism and consumer activism is a really massive trend, part of the social goodness trend. And it's making companies sit up and pay attention. When you've got somebody like BlackRock, who are like the biggest investors in the US, actually saying, okay, we're not going to invest now in people who are destroying the Amazon. We're taking all of those investments out of there, and we're going to become sustainable investment. You know then that there's something big going on. When Exxon makes a huge turn, when you get $1 trillion of investment going into ESG companies in 2020, it's massive, and they have to listen. And we've seen it with all of them. If the advertisers get stroppy, they suddenly start listening.
So I mean, you're so spot on, Claire, right? I mean, part of what I'm trying to say to category creators is when you embed impact design into your category, part of that is to embed some sense of a movement marketing element into it, so that you build some kind of a positive movement for change. Because like, we're running out of time, right? I mean, we can see we're running out of time. Like, there's not much else you can continue to keep harvesting from this planet before you don't have a planet anymore.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, so David Attenborough has been cataloging the die-off of the oceans and other species. And and climate change is just accelerating to such a point that it's dumbfounding the scientists who are trying to track it. So I think
UN had, I think, said, the climate change panel had said, we have like 8 years before we reach the point of no return, right? And so it's scary, right? And the biggest scary factor, especially for companies that do category design, and this is what I want to write about tomorrow, is that they only think of the human element. They don't think that we're sharing this planet with a whole host of other creatures and species and plants and trees. They don't think of that. They only think, oh, how is my category going to help better human life? But what kind of impact is that going to have on animal life or forestry?
Yeah, it's all that interconnection, isn't it? I think that is what a lot of people on the street are recognizing, but a lot of entrepreneurs, founders, and small business people and medium business people, and quite a lot of large business people are so wrapped up in what they're doing, i.e. making a profit, that they forget that actually what's important is how their impact is in the world. And it's a good thing. And I loved your article on Medium, where you were saying that if you don't take into account the impact you have as a leader, then it's all for nothing, basically.
Correct. And someone had, funnily enough, put something today on LinkedIn that really resonated with me, where they said, I mean, okay, so you're a millionaire or a billionaire. That's great, but that's not going to save your children from climate change.
No, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think we're at a tipping point. And I'm very heartened that people are coming together to actually make a difference, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Been lovely talking to you. Please come back at the very end and let's talk a bit about Wicked Seven.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So next up, I'm going to talk to Christian Sarkar, who is an incredibly inspiring person. He wrote Brand Activism with marketing legend Philip Kotler, and he also is founder of Wicked 7, which is an incredible project. Hi.
Claire. Hi there.
Hi, lovely to have you along.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome. So I first heard of you via your book, Brand Activism. And then we connected on LinkedIn and you introduced me to Wicked 7. Now, Brand Activism to me is an incredible book. I think somebody on your reviews was saying it ought to be taught in universities as part of, marketing. And I think it really should. So for those of people who are tuned in who don't really know, can you just give us an overview of what it's all about?
Sure. It's about the idea that brands need to take a stand when governments and other organizations and institutions are failing them. So in the US, for example, we know that our government really doesn't work for the people. And, we've seen that, it's been a long history of sort of the corruption of government. And even you could even say this is partly the fault of capitalism. It's partly the fault that we haven't had any checks and balances. But what started happening, and this was, of course, the hippies who led the way, so Ben & Jerry's is a hippie company originally.
Yeah, this is true.
Right. Bought over by Unilever. But something interesting happened when Unilever bought them. They didn't change their soul. They kept a separate sort of conscience board intact, and those guys are in charge of doing the social justice stuff. And Ben & Jerry's just won this huge award in terms of their number one in social justice. And so
they're also exceptionally profitable.
And they're also exceptionally profitable. Yeah. Well, first of all, they've got great ice cream.
Yeah, I mean, really good ice cream. Yeah.
Right. Now, can they be more sustainable? Yes. And I think they're working on all kinds of. There was a project I know of where they were looking at how do you build a regenerative farm so that the cows don't you minimize sort of the impact of the cow on the with the milk, and of course you have to use just the right kind of cow with the right kind of no hormones in the milk, that kind of stuff. But that's old stuff. What they're doing now is they've gotten far more into the social justice stuff with Colin Kaepernick and supporting Black Lives Matter, getting out the vote. So they're actually pro-democracy. So who would have thought, let's say, 10 years ago even, that companies would be encouraging democracy because we see democracy going away or fading.
That's such a shift, isn't it?
It is.
And yet, the stats say that the brands that aren't sharing political and social justice in their output are being completely ignored. The trend on social media is up.
Sure, they're being ignored, but more importantly, they're coming down on the wrong side of history. So one of the things we say in this brand activism book, which Phil Kotler and I wrote that in about 2017, we wrote the first edition. Then 2018, we updated it. And then now we have an Indian edition coming out with Penguin. We have a Italian edition that came out last year. And it's sort of bubbling up everywhere. But the idea is this. Companies just can't afford, to do nothing. And because the companies that do are automatically differentiated. So what you have, first of all, you've got a consumer that's smarter, that does know, like you say in your book, they know right away what's happening, this incredible transparency that's happened. And of course, that's one reason some countries are going to ban Facebook completely.
Yeah.
And China doesn't have a Facebook, so they get to say what they like, right? So they've got another kind of problem. And then, of course, Facebook tries to cancel Australia when they try to mess with them. So So think about that. A platform like Facebook tries to cancel a country and say, well, you're not welcome on our platform.
Yeah.
And I think Facebook has to be very careful now because people are watching them very closely. And The kids have left Facebook, by the way. Kids aren't on Facebook anymore. It's us older people that are still on Facebook, or kind of on Facebook too, because we don't want to lose our connection with the few people, friends that we have. But I do think you're seeing this idea that the strategy for the future is justice.
Yeah.
And environmental justice, social justice, economic justice, gender justice, every form of justice becomes part of the brand. And a brand that stands against that is no longer considered a good citizen. So it's actually pretty simple, But Unilever is probably one of the best companies at turning this into a profit. And what they've done is they've got some 28 brands out of their 250 that are responsible for 45%, 48% of their profits. Or something like that, some crazy number. But it's a handful of brands that are driving all their growth and all their and a sizable portion of their profits. So, and these are the purpose brands, the brands that are sort of have.
And Unilever's got that history. They've tried to step that on that line all the way through. I mean, they're not perfect. They've fallen off the end of times.
And why does this happen? Yeah, it's because you have a CEO. This was, of course, Paul Polman, who decided that he was going to do this. He was just going to take that risk. And so there is a risk. Just a few days ago, the guy from Danone, the French yogurt company, got canned because he was too progressive, supposedly. That's what the headlines read. But apparently it was because it wasn't the progressive part that was being objected to. It was the fact that they couldn't perform well in the market. And they had been, going down. So the headlines, of course, said, "Oh, the purpose guy is getting axed at Danone," but it wasn't that. It was actually the financial performance. And similarly, if you look at what Unilever is doing, their financial performance in foods, for example, has been great. And we interviewed Hanneke Faber, who was the head of foods at Unilever, and she basically said that brand activism is the future of branding. That's her actual quote. So what we love about that is we feel like when companies like that, who are category leaders, lead the way, then they drag everybody else with them. And that's really what Paul Polman's doing today. When he left Unilever, he started his own little consulting company to bring together the CEOs of a lot of these companies and industries and say, if we can get a critical mass of CEOs to act together, so they're not, so no one's accused of sticking their head out and doing something reckless. But if they all take 3 steps together in the same direction, then the entire industry moves. Now, is this going to be enough? Are we moving fast enough? Probably not. In fact, definitely not.
Yeah.
So which brings us to our Wicked 7 problem.
For the people watching who aren't aware of Wicked 7, explain exactly what it is and what we're trying to achieve.
Sure. And I just want to tell your listeners that Claire and Karthi are both, we are all part of this craziness. But what we are doing really is saying, hey, brand activism is a top-down thing. And that's great. We want as many companies to do that, to have social goodness, to have a conscience, to start acting responsibly, not just for profit, but for the entire planet and society. So we want that. But at the same time, that's probably not fast enough and not enough. So what do we want to do? We want to map out, and this is what the Wicked 7 is. It's a design challenge to bring people together, institutions together, companies together, students together, to sort of create a movement of movements that says, here are the world's wicked problems. And we've picked 7 of them, which can be further subdivided into some 250 subcategories. But if you can think of a problem, it's probably under one of our Wicked 7 challenges. And what we're saying is we can't solve these problems right now, but the first thing we're going to do is map them out. So by mapping them, we mean we're going to show how one problem leads to another and how these problems are interconnected. And just by doing that, we'll have what we call the Wikidpedia, which will be a way for people to look at this, learn about how these problems work, and then dig deeper, because we're going to have some research and some ideas underneath each one of these links and causes and effects. So that's really what this challenge is. It's a design project to save humanity from itself. And let me just say something, as somebody who grew up in India and sort of came out of the colonial sort of history of the British. It's our view, it's not everyone's, but certainly my view, that England came home and colonized itself and its own people. And that's really why you guys are in this, and the same thing with America. That's what's happened, is the colonizers ended up colonizing their own people. And so we've got this brutal form of capitalism that destroys value. And instead of creating value for a few shareholders, it destroys value for society. And so we've got to find a balance between public value, private value, and plural value, which is the plural sector, which we can say is communities, nonprofits, churches, all these other guys. So we have to balance these, and that's the problem with our ecosystems. They're way out of balance. And so
I think that people are actually recognizing that, and that's why we're seeing this upsurge in social goodness everywhere, and why people are now starting to call it out where they're seeing it. And in some ways, social media has become that perfect vehicle for making brands pay attention, stop being colonial, stop wrecking stuff, stop putting profit before people. We want it the other way around. We want you to do good. We expect you to do good. We expect you to get your hero pants on and actually get out there and do good. Enough now.
And that's why it's so important, Claire, what you're doing. This book, it's and I'm seeing this now among a lot of the people that I know. Everybody's trying to make a difference individually and collectively. And that's, I think, the most important thing here, that we've decided that, yes, we can't wait for businesses to do everything. We've got to do something in our own lives.
Yeah, absolutely. And everybody has to get involved. And businesses have to put their house in order. Because as we saw with Cadbury, if you try and, like in India, they try to say, celebrate diversity, and they got absolutely slammed for it. And a lot of it is because their own house is not in order. They were using unsustainable palm oil, their supply chains were rubbish and rotten, they weren't paying their taxes, they were behaving like proper colonial companies.
Let me tell you something, Claire. The most important activist is actually the employee.
Yeah.
So
we saw it with Facebook, didn't we? Their staff got themselves in such a lather about the way that Facebook was giving Trump a free pass when he was spreading lies about COVID, lies about the election, and they just walked out. They just said, okay, that's enough now. Walking out. And you're
seeing companies that do have a social purpose, that do have a conscience, a brand conscience, let's call it that. If corporations are people, then they better have a conscience, right?
Well, they are legally people, so they have to have a conscience.
Right. So what we're seeing now is employees are gravitating towards companies with a conscience, and that's key, and that becomes a competitive advantage for attracting the talent.
It does, because it reduces the turnover. It means that people are more productive. They are advocates for the brand they work for. They're just not there doing 9 to 5. They bring their whole selves. They'll come up with new ideas. I love the idea of reverse mentoring as well, where the employees mentor the C-suite. And all of that is so positive. And people see that. They see that somebody loves working for the company and has everything good to say about them. And it makes a difference. It really makes a difference.
No, what we're seeing is a challenge to sort of the last 2,000 years of history is what we're seeing.
It's huge. It's a massive thing we're trying to achieve. But I do love the fact that it's global. I can see it in every niche. I love the fact that ESG, good ESG companies are now getting masses of investment. That the people who are inheriting wealth from the baby boomers, the millennials, they are beginning to invest as a priority in ethical companies. I love this whole impact-driven leadership. I mean, as you say, is it enough? No. Is it going to get more? Yes. Will it be enough eventually? I don't know. I hope so. I really hope
No,
so.
it has to, because the only way forward, if we are to have a future, I mean, there's really only two futures. One is we're going to kill ourselves by
Yeah.
fighting, because nature will eventually kill us all, but we won't wait. We're going to have a war. We're going to beat each other up. We're going to do all kinds of nasty things to each other and kill ourselves off way before nature gets to it. But
Yeah.
nature is the driver, and what we've done is sort of challenge every assumption that we've had about business that we've been taught in business school is wrong.
I agree. Yeah.
And that's the scales are falling off the eyes. And I can tell you that there are so many professors in business schools now who are disgusted with the way that, you know, the curriculum, and there are efforts. Like, I've worked with a guy named Stuart Hart, who wrote that book, wrote the first article called The Fortune at the Base of the Pyramid with C.K. Prahalad. This
Yeah.
is Stuart Hart. He has spent his life trying to convert the curriculum in these business schools, starting with Michigan, Cornell, Flagler School at Carolina, and then the last one was the University of Vermont, to put sustainability at the heart of the MBA. Generally speaking,
That is it, isn't it?
All right.
I was about to say, I'm sure we're coming up to deadline. Hello.
I honestly, I really don't want to do this, because it's like listening to such, you know, there is hope this evening. All right. It fills me with so much hope. And so, you know, it's like, please keep putting out this message, because I think what is really good is, I think, for want of a better word, consumers want to hear messages like this. We want to know what we can do, you know, to support our planet, to make sure that there's a future. And the pressure that seems to be growing to turn things totally over is just tremendous. It really is. I don't know if you want, now that the three of you are here together, just, you know, a last shout out for Wicked 7, and then I'll give a really big last shout out for Social Goodness.
Christian, give the URL, please.
Sure, it's wicked7.org. There you go.
Yeah.
Everybody can get involved. Everybody can get involved. Please do.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's wonderful. To the three of you, thank you for this evening. You know, I think in the last year, we've been online a lot. We've been in Zoom meetings a lot. But this one will stick in my mind and in my heart going forward. So really appreciate what you've come on to say. And Claire, all the very, very best with this book. You know,
Thank you.
I've got goosebumps, because I think it's going to be alongside, you know, those texts that will take us forward into a better age.
I hope so. And if people want to find out more, we have a website, socialgoodness.co.uk. You can subscribe. We'll be putting out newsletters, updates. There will be an update. I know there'll be an update to the book, because it's just moving at such a pace. And there'll be follow-up. So yeah, do subscribe and keep up to date with it.
Wonderful, thank you. So Christian, Kathy, and especially Claire, for this evening, all the very best, every success.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure.
A total pleasure, and a fabulous comment there from Angie to finish off for us. May those big companies take this message on board and make a total change.
Go Claire.
Thank you.
For now,
Thank
everyone. Yeah.
Go Karthik.
Yeah.
Congrats, Claire.
Thank you.
Oh, I hope you've thoroughly enjoyed something very different. And again, as I say, Honey and Stag are always keen to promote texts that make you think, texts that get you focused in a different way. So it just remains for me to say, as ever, a huge thank you to Kelly Lacey for organising this event and for technically taking us through together. Really appreciate, Kelly. Without you, there would be no Honey and Stag. Thank you, everybody, for watching. I hope you take away from this hope and ideas for a better future. Goodbye for now.